poor black waitress helped an old man in the rain, but what followed the next morning shattered her world. Denise Carter walked into work soaked and 5 minutes late, only to be fired in front of a crowd that watched in silence. She had no idea the stranger she saved that night was watching too, and the moment he stepped through that diner door, every cruel word her manager said would come back to haunt him. Before we go any further, we'd love for you to hit that subscribe button. Your support means the world to us, and it helps us bring you even more powerful stories. Now, let's begin. The storm was relentless that night, slamming against the windshield like it wanted to push her off the road. Denise Carter gripped the steering wheel of her old white pickup, wipers scraping hard just to keep a glimpse of the street ahead. The diner had closed late and she was dead tired, her gray uniform still damp from a spilled pot of coffee hours earlier. All she wanted was warmth and silence. Then she saw it, a black luxury sedan parked crooked on the roadside, hazard lights blinking weakly through the downpour. The hood was up, steam rising in thin, desperate curls. As she slowed, her headlights caught the outline of an elderly white man standing beside the car, coat drenched, one hand on the fender for balance. No umbrella, no help, just a soaked suit and a tired face staring into the rain. She hesitated. It was late, the kind of night that taught people to mind their business. But she saw the way his shoulders shook, how his fingers struggled to hold a phone that clearly had no signal out here. Denise sighed, pulled over, and rolled down her window halfway. The smell of wet asphalt and engine oil filled the cab. "You okay out here?" she called. Her voice cut through the storm. The man turned, startled, squinting through the rain. "My car is dead. No tow trucks answering. I think I took a wrong turn." Denise reached over, unlocked the passenger door, and leaned toward the window. "You'll freeze out here. Get in before you drown." He hesitated, studying her, a stranger offering help on an empty road. Then he nodded, opened the door, and slid in, dripping water onto the worn seat. The heater barely worked, but she cranked it anyway. The hum filled the silence as they drove off slowly. His voice was quiet, but grateful. "You didn't have to stop." Denise shrugged. "Guess I did. Can't leave someone's granddad melting in the rain." That earned the faintest laugh. He introduced himself as Henry Weston, said he'd been driving back from a late meeting outside the city. The storm had caught him halfway and his car gave up soon after. Denise listened but didn't pry. She just drove, the headlights sweeping over wet trees, the rhythm of rain steady and heavy on the roof. She took him to her neighborhood, a line of narrow apartment blocks shadowed by flickering streetlights. Inside her small one-room flat, she handed him a towel and a warm cup of instant soup. The radiator clicked weakly. She gave him her only blanket, ignoring his protests. When he finally drifted off on her couch, she sat quietly by the window, watching the rain slow to a drizzle. Her reflection looked tired, but peaceful. She had done the right thing. Before dawn, she left for work. The couch was empty, the blanket folded neatly. A note rested on the table. "Thank you for seeing me as a person." She smiled faintly, folded the note into her pocket, and stepped back into the gray morning. The streets were slick, the air sharp. She didn't know yet that the man she'd helped would walk into her life again, and that his next visit would change everything. The morning dragged in gray and cold. Denise's shoes squeaked on the diner floor as she rushed through the door 10 minutes behind. Her hair was still damp, her breath quick from the sprint up the hill. The smell of frying bacon and cheap coffee hit her like a wall. Behind the counter, Steve Harlow was already barking orders, his sleeves rolled, voice loud enough for the customers to hear. "Carter, you think time bends for you?" His tone dripped contempt. Denise caught her breath, eyes lowered. "I'm sorry, sir. Save it," he snapped, slamming a receipt pad on the counter. "We've got a packed morning, the owner's visiting, and you stroll in like you're doing us a favor." A few customers turned their heads. The young cook froze over the grill. The clatter of dishes quieted. The tension in the room was thick enough to taste. Denise tried again, gentle, calm. "I had to help someone. An older man broke down in the storm. I couldn't just—" "Steve," cut her off with a wave. "You think good deeds pay rent? You're late. That's all that matters." He turned to the crowd, voice rising. "If any of you want to show up late too, maybe you can join her out the door." A few people chuckled under their breath. Others looked away. Denise's chest tightened. "Please, Mr. Harlow, I worked here 4 years. You know I don't—" He pointed to the door. "You're done. Hand over your apron. I don't need excuses. I need reliability." Silence. Even the fryer seemed to stop bubbling. Denise untied her apron, hands trembling, jaw tight. She laid it carefully on the counter, refusing to let him see her break. As she turned toward the door, a woman in a booth whispered to her friend, "That poor thing. She's the nicest one here." Denise walked out into the drizzle, the bell above the door jingling one last time. The rain was softer now, but it stung worse than last night. She pulled her coat tighter and kept walking. Behind her, inside the diner, Steve smirked and straightened his tie. "Perfect timing. The owner's finally coming today. The last thing I need is charity cases making the place look sloppy." Outside, Denise stopped at the corner, her reflection faint in the puddle at her feet. She had done the right thing. She was sure of it. But right didn't pay bills. She didn't notice the black sedan slowly rolling past the diner, its tinted window lowering just as slightly. Inside, Henry Weston watched her walk away, his face unreadable, the same note she gave him resting on the passenger seat beside him. He adjusted his tie, looked back at the diner sign flickering in the rain, and said softly to himself, "So this is where she works." He stepped on the gas. What happened next would rewrite both their lives. By noon, the diner buzzed with energy. The rain had stopped and sunlight spilled through the windows. The smell of coffee and fresh pie filled the air. Steve Harlow stood by the counter, straightening napkin holders for the 5th time. He was restless, nervous, hidden behind fake confidence. The staff whispered. No one had ever met the elusive owner, and today was the day. At exactly 12:30, the door opened. The bell chimed once. A tall, silver-haired man stepped inside, dressed in a dark, tailored coat, polished shoes, and a composure that quieted the whole room. His presence was calm but commanding, the kind that made people stand straighter without knowing why. The cook paused mid-turn at the grill. A waitress froze with a coffee pot half raised. Steve hurried forward with a salesman's smile plastered on his face. "Mr. Weston, welcome, sir," Steve said, voice high with forced warmth. "Everything's running perfectly. Clean, efficient, just like you'd want." Henry scanned the diner. His eyes moved over the booths, the counter, the polished chrome, the staff trying not to stare. But when he saw the empty corner where Denise used to work, his jaw tightened slightly. "Where's the young woman from last night?" he asked, voice even. Steve blinked. "I'm sorry, sir." "Denise Carter," Weston said again. "The waitress who worked here yesterday morning." The manager forced a laugh. "Oh, her. I had to let her go, I'm afraid. Always late, poor attitude, not the kind of image you'd want for your business." Weston's expression didn't change, but the silence that followed cut through the chatter like a blade. He turned toward the cook. "Is that true?" The cook looked at his shoes. "No, sir. Denise was the best we had." Steve's smile faltered. "People like to exaggerate. I run a tight ship here." Weston stepped closer. "You fired her this morning?" "Yes, sir." "For cause?" Weston nodded slowly. Then he said, "Call her back. Immediately." The color drained from Steve's face. "Sir, that won't be necessary. I said, call her back," Weston repeated. The room went dead quiet. 5 minutes later, the bell above the door chimed again. Denise stepped inside, still in her wrinkled uniform, confusion etched on her face. Every head turned as she walked in, unsure why she'd been summoned. Weston's eyes softened when he saw her. "Miss Carter," he said, voice steady but warm. "You helped me last night when no one else would. You didn't know who I was, and you didn't care. You just saw a person who needed help." Whispers rippled through the diner. The cook dropped his spatula. The waitress gasped. Weston continued. "You showed me what this place should represent, so I'm making it official. Denise Carter is reinstated as co-manager, effective immediately." Steve's jaw fell open. "You can't be serious. I'm very serious." Weston interrupted. "You wanted to impress me, Mr. Harlow? Congratulations. You just did that the wrong way." The staff clapped quietly, relief flooding the room. Denise stood speechless, tears brimming. Weston smiled faintly. "You gave me kindness in the rain. I intend to return it with respect." The bell above the door jingled again as customers walked in, unaware they were stepping into a diner that had just changed forever. Weeks later, the diner was alive again. The mornings buzzed with regulars, the coffee flowed steady, and laughter returned to the booths. Under Denise's quiet leadership, things ran smoother than ever. The tips increased, the customers lingered longer, and Weston's visits became less about oversight and more about pride. But not everyone shared that pride. Steve Harlow's smile had gone hollow. He worked the register now, no longer the boss, just another employee answering to the woman he once humiliated. Each time she passed by, polite and unbothered, something darker grew behind his calm expression. He stayed late after hours, pacing the kitchen, muttering. Then came the missing cash. At first it was small, 50 here, 70 there. Denise caught it during a late-night count. She checked twice, then 3 times. No mistakes. She didn't accuse anyone, but the worry settled deep in her gut. When it happened again, she went straight to Weston. "I've balanced every register myself," she said. "It's deliberate. Someone's trying to make it look like I'm stealing." Weston studied her face. "Do you have any guesses?" "None I can prove," she said. He nodded. "Then we'll find proof." That evening, hidden cameras were installed near the counters. Weston brought in a quiet man in plain clothes, a private investigator. No one in the diner knew, except him and Denise. Days passed. Denise worked as usual, smiling through the unease. Steve kept to himself, but his eyes lingered too long on the drawer she used. Then, one Tuesday night, while the rain returned outside, the camera caught it. Steve waited until Denise left early to handle a delivery. He opened her register, pulled out a stack of bills, then replaced her count slip with one of his own. He even smiled, whispering, "Let's see you talk your way out of this." The next morning, Weston called a full staff meeting. Everyone gathered around the counter, confused. The investigator placed a small laptop on the table and hit play. The footage rolled. The silence was brutal. Steve's hand, the money, the smirk, everything. He went pale. "That's edited. She's setting me up." Denise didn't move. Weston's voice cut through the noise, calm but cold. "You framed the one person who saved me. You tried to ruin her reputation in my business. I built this place on trust, and you made it rot." 2 officers stepped in quietly. The handcuffs clicked before Steve could say another word. He shouted curses as they let him out, but no one looked up. The rest of the day, the diner stayed oddly quiet. Denise worked her shift as usual, polite but distant. When Weston approached later that night, he said softly, "You handled it with grace. Most people would have screamed." She smiled faintly. "I learned something that night, in the rain. Some storms you stand through, others pass on their own." The neon sign flickered against the wet glass outside. This time, its reflection looked cleaner. 6 months later, the diner looked nothing like the one Denise had been fired from. The windows gleamed, the new sign above the door read, "Rainy Day Diner," and every seat was filled. People came not just for the food, but for the story, the one about a waitress who helped a stranger and changed both their lives. Inside, the air was warm, filled with laughter and the smell of fresh coffee. Denise moved easily through the room, clipboard in hand, offering a smile to everyone she passed. Staff members worked smoothly under her direction, proud to be part of something built on respect instead of fear. Weston sat in his usual corner booth, quietly watching her work. The press had written about her months ago, calling her the heart behind the diner's rebirth. When a local reporter asked what made him give her half ownership, he'd said only, "She gave me kindness when she had nothing. That's worth more than profit." That night, he stood up and called for everyone's attention. "We built this place on compassion." Denise reminded us what that means. "Today, I'm making it official. She's not just co-manager anymore. She's my partner." The staff broke into applause. Denise covered her face for a moment, overwhelmed. Weston handed her an envelope, legal papers confirming full partnership. "You've earned every bit of this," he said. Later, as the lights dimmed and the last customers left, Denise stepped outside for air. Across the street, under the neon glow of a car wash sign, a familiar figure scrubbed a windshield. Steve Harlow, his shoulders hunched, uniform damp from the mist. For a long moment, she just watched him. Then she walked across the street, calm and composed. He froze as she stopped beside him. Without a word, she handed him a sealed envelope. "What's this?" he asked, voice low. "Your name's on it. Open it when you're ready." She turned and walked away. When he finally tore it open, he found a small check made to a local charity and a donation receipt in his name. Under it, a handwritten note. "Everyone deserves a second chance. I had 9. Back at the diner, Denise flipped the sign from closed to open. The morning light crept through the glass, reflecting off the polished counter. She tied her apron, her movements calm and sure. The first customer walked in, shaking off rain from his coat. Denise smiled softly. "Morning," she said. "Welcome to Rainy Day Diner, where kindness is always on."